I am dumb. I want to make that clear because there's nothing wrong with being dumb. Sometimes just have to have a minute to get your head around it. Getting on to the video though, some people in wrestling seemingly are born to be bad guys. This is a good thing, ironically. If you're a natural at that, you're likely going to make it to the big time. Given that wrestling never ends though, sometimes you gotta try new things, and damn it, against all odds, a big old babyface turned work. So I am Simon Miller, and let's talk about some of the most surprising ones. Number 10, Baron Corbin. Hopefully this will have aged by the time you hear this, but WWE is wasting what they have with Baron Corbin. He went back to NXT a few years ago to re-find himself, and he did just that. Even went back to the drawing board, got that edge back, not Adam Copeland, and thanks to an awesome team with Bron Breakker, he became a beloved good guy. This wasn't forced either. Baron was doing such solid work you couldn't help but respect it, given this was a dude who was despised, especially in 2019 when he ruled the roost as Constable Corbin. Well, it just sums this whole list up. There's no rules here. Sometimes sports entertainment will surprise you, and again, we can absolutely do more with Baron. We are just on the tip of the iceberg. To be honest, I'm still a little bit mad about sad broke Corbin. That would have been the best babyface turn ever. Number 9, the Hurricane. All the way back in 2001, the flub does the time go. Shane Helms basically set the bar for why goofy wrestling for life gimmicks can be fantastic though, because he became the Hurricane, and look at the track record. The man became a beloved memory for anybody who was watching at the time. Let's not forget that after the invasion was over, a lot of WCW guys found themselves persona non grata too, but not Helms. He was so popular, fans forgot where he came from. They just fell in love with the guy. He was genuinely entertaining. Shane could also go in the ring, which meant the gimmick was more than a one-trick pony. And even though he was meant to be a villain in 2001, by 2002 it was just an all-round joy. It also led to the super fun stuff with The Rock, which also wouldn't have worked if the Hurricane didn't connect with the audience like he did. Don't forget about the child crowd too. That's who wrestling is really for, and they ate this up. Of course they did. It was a real-life superhero. Number 8, the Big Boss Man. 1990 was an interesting time for wrestling. You know the deal. As the years did go by, a lot of wrestlers were going to have a secondary job. With the Big Boss Man, it was kind of intriguing too, because he was meant to be a corrupt policeman who decided to head to the ring and beat people up. Not sure you're meant to like that. The real-life Ray trailer then took on Ted DiBiase, and that's when all of this shifted. The $1 Million Man struck a deal with the Boss Man's manager Slick to go and get his $1 Million title from Jake Roberts, when the Cop decided, nope, that's not happening, and he turned babyface. It was the right move as the fans loved this, so yeah, the Boss Man just started saying the law was awesome, and if you crossed him, he'd take you to jail. I mean, I suppose he did know the right protocols. It just felt like it couldn't work because of the story we'd laid down, but a lot of this was thanks to Ray. He is a forgotten gem in 2024, a massive dude who knew exactly what to do depending on the feud. In many ways, he was ahead of the game. This is another character who is so fondly remembered today too, so it was definitely the way to go. Number 7, Nia Jax. So this was 2018, and fans wrongfully forget about this. It was really good. WWE actually cut their own legs off as they turned Nia Jax way too fast after she won the women's title, because the build to that victory had been so good. It was proper sports entertainment. Basically, despite her size, we found a way to get Nia loads of sympathy, thanks to Alexa Bliss being the worst bully of all time. She laid into Jax's looks, her past, her ring work. It was genuinely heartbreaking, mostly because of how Nia sold this. It looked like she was on the verge of tears the whole time. We can all relate to that. It also culminated with a lovely win at WrestleMania 34, and what a good moral story. Don't be a Eventually, it'll catch up to you. A few weeks afterwards, Jax was a bad guy again, I think just because Vince McMahon saw her as a monster heel. And look, in 2024, Nia has this down and then some. The other side is in her locker, however. And I don't think we should forget that. Know of any other surprising baby faces? Make sure you let me know in the comments below before you like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Number 6, The Miz. As recent as 2023, and this was wild, we talked about it during the intro, that Miz felt like a bad guy for life. It was all during Gunther's Intercontinental title reign, which could be the best of all time, and yeah, when The Miz challenged him for that belt, the ring general thought this was hilarious. The A-lister, as far as he's concerned, was a massive joke. That was too much for the real-life Mike Mizanin, though, and this was a risk. WWE had tried this before, and the fans didn't take to it. But things were different now. For you see, there's always a wonderful moment in wrestling when if you do put in enough time, the audience understands how deserving you are so they get behind you. This was the Miz's moment. So when he did remind Gunther of all this and all the crap he'd been through, yeah. You tell him, dude, you've had a Hall of Fame career and deserve all the plaudits. It got over so well, some were even saying The Miz should beat Gunther. And while that didn't happen, it did lead to the tag team with R-Truth and that very satisfying tag team title win at WrestleMania 40. They both deserved that. Their legacies speak for themselves. It's sort of funny as The Miz was a heel again before the end of 2024, but still, it is all true. The man is one of a kind. Number 5, Vince McMahon. So this is hard to talk about today for obvious reasons, but let's set the scene. In 1999, Vince McMahon was coming off being the most hated guy in wrestling. The Steve Austin feud had turned the WWF's fortunes around, and yeah, the thought of trying to pitch him as anything else seemed crazy. Not even entirely sure Vince himself had planned it. During this year, though, his daughter Stephanie did turn her back on her dad to join forces with Triple H as they ran roughshod over the company. Amazingly, this put Father McMahon in an interesting position. Man, it worked. This was mostly as Vince was shown as the dad who couldn't handle what was happening to his family, so yeah. That was relatable to a wider audience, much as Steve Austin had been wanting to whoop his boss's ass the year before. We've all experienced these emotions. It was never going to be a long-term decision, and eventually he did screw over The Rock, but you go and watch this today. McMahon actually found a way to be accepted by the audience. Triple H and Stephanie deserve credit for that too. As the heels, they were horrible. We certainly didn't need to make Vince the WWE champion during this, but that's a different story for a different video. And you know the deal. They just can't help themselves. Number 4, Paul Heyman. For most of his WWE run, Paul Heyman has been the evil manager. Brock Lesnar, CM Punk, the bad version of Roman Reigns. Hell, that's how he made the fans realize Roman was a bad guy now. We just sat him next to Heyman. It worked tremendously well as those two in the bloodline became the hottest act in the industry. And due to that, Paul also got the good guy rub. As well as everybody else, the crowd saw the wonderful work Heyman was doing week in, week out. This brings us to June 2024 when, the new bloodline led by Solo Sikoa decided Heyman was an issue and they threw him through Alan the announce table. The audience was livid. This had been underlined moments before because Paul had refused to acknowledge Solo as his tribal chief, and oh how they roared. It just sums up the power of this story too. Not only did Reigns turn into the super babyface people had always wanted, but the Usos, Sami Zayn and Heyman all benefited as well. Like a star-making vehicle. Paul may even be back on TV by the time you see this, and I already know he is going to get an amazing reaction due to all of the above, because Paul Heyman is an accidental babyface. Number 3, The Undertaker in 1992. You have to remember this was only 2 years into The Undertaker's WWF run, so he was still an undead zombie. How the hell are you going to make that work as a hero? Well, basically, we were going to lean right into the character. This was because Mark Calloway was so good at being sort of an empty vessel, you could paste whatever you wanted onto it, which is exactly what we did with Jake Roberts. Mr. Snake had decided he was going to smash Miss Elizabeth with a chair and was hiding backstage to do it when an ominous hand reached out to stop this, and it was the flipping Undertaker. Him and Jake had basically been teaming together and even ruined the Macho Man's wedding a few months prior when the Phenom decided no more, and it worked perfectly. Not only did the audience erupt for this, but look at the timeline. Taker didn't turn heel again until 1998. 6 years as the hero. It's also how the WrestleMania streak started because people wanted to see him win, and we did all of this without much emotion. That's another reason the gimmick is all time. Not everybody could have done this, it took some real skills. By 1993, the pops for the Tombstone was super loud, and how mad is that? The guy who used to throw people into body bags was our man. I mean, that really is wrestling. Number 2, Brock Lesnar. Another controversial figure today, but look, back in 2021, as much as fans enjoyed Brock Lesnar, I'm not sure anybody saw him as a babyface. His whole shtick was eating people alive. In terms of his second run, this went all the way back to 2012 when Paul Heyman reteamed with his beast. And they certainly got superstar reactions, but yeah, Brock was so dominant you were meant to hate him. The thing is, that wasn't the case when he returned in that 2021. Coming back at SummerSlam and basically being Cowboy Lesnar was also a surprise, but so were Brock's microphone skills. All of a sudden, he was more comfortable than ever. He was having so much fun with this as well, and dare I say it, here and there it even touched upon goofy wrestling for life. He could get away with it, though. As soon as he stepped in the ring, he mauled people. So yeah, that will do it. It's balance. It also helped he was feuding with Roman, who was just hated at this point, but still. Not sure anybody on their bingo cards had smiling, joking Brock Lesnar, but that's what we got, and it really helped the character. Turned out he did need something different, and he found it. Number 1, too cool. So we are going back to 2000 because you have to remember what we are dealing with here. Look at Grandmaster Sexay and Scotty 2 Hottie. You think they're good guy names? No, they are not. You then throw a massive Samoa man in there who wore a thong and told them to dance after matches, so again, on paper this should get booed. It was the total opposite. It gets even weirder as the group at first was meant to be the stupid version of the Hardy Boys, but you can never account for anything in the then WWF, and my word did fans love this. They actually bought tickets to see these through goofs wiggle their hips. You damn right. If you do go to the summer of this year, you can argue Too Cool and Rikishi are more over than anybody in the whole company. But again, it really does sound dreadful when you try and explain it to someone. It is why wrestling is the best though, and the powers that be had no choice. We turned them babyface, and let's face it, it remains one of the best memories from the Attitude Era. And when you threw all that into a package, that is saying quite something. We all know best, right? Of course we do. That's why sometimes when a wrestler goes bad, you will scream at your TV, "What the flub is this? It's over, it's ruined. Let's all go home and moan." When you do give certain things time, though, you can be surprised, even if you have taken your biggest star and turned them into somewhat of a Nimrod. So I am Sam Miller, and here's some on-paper bad, but actually quite genius heel turns. Number 10, Tatanka in 1994. I mean, mostly because he was such a mid-90s good guy. He had the headdress, the dance down the aisleway, the chant. He was basically made to make children happy. He also went on a huge winning streak that was taken away by Ludwig Borger of all people in October 1993. But I suppose after that, Tatanka needed something else to do, so we started to tease. Essentially, it turned out the $1 Million Man was right because everybody does have a price. Tatanka signed up with Ted DiBiase. It felt like Lex Luger was going to be this guy when we did the switch, and the story was nice and easy. Tatanka now wanted to rise up to the top of the card and win some titles however he could. The issue was, it always felt like Tat wasn't really into this, and that's why it didn't work. If we had just gone all in, I think we could have done this way longer, especially because his winning streak had been killed. People can understand that. You have to find another way. So sure, it was a bust, but in terms of longevity, this would have been way better. And you could have turned him back in 1995. Meh. Number 9, Rikishi in 2000. Well, we all remember this one. You're likely not surprised to see it here. We did it for The Rock. Now let's not forget the role that Rikishi was given here. Given the spot of the man who ran over Steve Austin was huge, because when the Rattlesnake was back, you had to feud with him, and everybody wanted that in the year 2000. Big Keish would have done fine with it too, I think, when WWE added a racist angle to this. You know the deal there. Wrestling is awful with this stuff. Therefore, Rick was saying he did it for The Rock based on his background and lack of opportunities compared to Steve Austin. This was given as the reason as to why Rocky wasn't the face of the company. Management didn't like his skin color. Of course, you could argue that instantly because the People's Champion was huge at this point and at times was just as big as Austin. You also had the fact that Rock himself told Rikishi to shut up. It just didn't work. We also didn't give the Too Cool guy any big names to beat, so we did this all wrong. If we had just played into the family ties between himself and The Rock and how he hated Steve, that would have been way better. You could have run that program, and you could have even taken it to the future and taken a page out of John Cena and Umaga's playbook. I think that would have been way, way better. As it was, Keish was back to dancing soon after this, and by then, yeah, it was dead, it was over. It was ruined. Number 8, The Rock in 2003. So this pertained to only a section of the audience, but it was there. You can find it on old school message boards should you wish to waste your day. But when The Rock returned from his first Hollywood jaunt in 2003, some people did not want to boo him. This was their guy, and thank goodness he had come back. It was never going to work because the other side of the audience had decided Dwayne Johnson even thinking about movies was terrible, so screw this guy. Turned out to be the perfect marriage. But the Great One wore that Hollywood moniker quite literally and went on a tirade that was so good, it basically sowed the seeds for what was going to happen in 2024 and the final boss. It's just smart wrestling because we all knew that Rocky wanted to do films. If that annoyed you, great, we can generate some heat. What people also forget is that even before he left, fans were jeering him in matches with Hulk Hogan and Brock Lesnar. It was already there. Trying to fight it anymore would have been nuts, even if he was still crazy popular. It also gave Johnson a new lease when it came to his character. This really was very, very good. If nothing else, it gave birth to the Rock concert, number 7, Seth Rollins in 2019. This should have never have happened, and it was all WWE's fault. It was just fallout from the Seth Rollins and The Fiend Hell in a Cell match, which was terrible. Even management knew this, and they laughed about it. Great. Thanks. The fans on the night in the building even booed. That's how bad it was. Bray Wyatt was sort of protected because he was spooky wooky, but as for Seth, he was meant to be the goodest of good guys. That had now suffered. I'm sure Rollins was pissed as he should have been, especially because at first this new heel character didn't take. It was just so all over the place. WWE was clearly trying to sort it week to week. This hadn't been the plan. The thing is, as soon as Seth did find his feet with it and transformed himself into the crazy cult guy on Monday nights, he got the response he was aiming for. Let's also face it, Rollins was so good at this a few years later he was back to being a babyface. That takes some doing. That's why Seth deserves way more praise than he gets. He is all time. It also could have ended other people's careers, which we had seen before. Seth Rollins instead rode the wave, and maybe came out the other side even better than ever. Number 6, CM Punk in 2012. Why change something that didn't need to be changed? That's what a lot of people said when at Raw 1000 in 2012, CM Punk clotheslined The Rock's head off. This was mostly because fans still loved the voice of the voiceless after his Summer of Punk the year prior. Really, they just wanted to stick with that. The thing is, the story was right there. During this time, Punk had been very vocal about so-called part-timers, so when Dwayne Johnson returned to take the Mania spot, which he had talked about during his pipe bomb, well, once again, why would CM Punk ignore this? On that note too, if you do want to take wrestling as real, this is exactly what the man would have done. He meant every word that came out of his mouth, so when it happened in front of his face, screw this. Actually super clever. It also led to a great run for Punk, and look, while I doubt he could have been lost in the shuffle if it wasn't for this, going heel kept him towards the top of the card. It is a shame WWE still didn't buy in 100%, but we all know about that. Feels better today. Thank goodness. Number 5, AJ Styles in 2016. AJ Styles had only debuted for the WWE in January at the Royal Rumble, so people were happy to see him. We waited years for this. This meant when he turned heel on John Cena just a few months later in May, there was a loud contingent that didn't get it. We could have done this years later. Why jump in so early? He joined forces with the Good Brothers too, which were his real-life friends, but look at the results. Not only did Styles find a way to get feud, but his feud with Cena sort of established him in the WWE. He even beat him and became the WWE champion. If you were an AJ fan, this was above your wildest dreams. It was almost surreal, especially because at one point the story was he was never going to get there. Backstage was where the genius lied because it changed how Vince McMahon perceived him. And as we know, that was critical to anybody's success in WWE. What we'd all known for ages finally became apparent. As a good guy, I'm not sure this would have clicked, so thank goodness we did do this. Styles ain't no mid-carder, he's a genuine game changer. So to sum it up, he cemented himself and ever since has always been used at the top of the card. Who knows where we would have been without it. Number 4, Michael Cole in 2011. Now, a lot of this sucked. You don't want your lead announcer being a heel because it means your voice throughout the whole show is being a dickhead. That can be really insufferable. Let's remember that Michael Cole never asked for this though, so in terms of somebody just following orders and getting the job done, amazing work. We even had a logical thread because for years the fans had been telling Mike he wasn't as good as Jim Ross. We didn't want him, so eventually he snapped. I can get that. So while it was difficult at times too, WWE had become so kid-friendly at this point, sometimes it was actually Cole who was bringing the edge, not Adam Copeland. You also got the ridiculous Cole mine, a box Michael sat in to protect himself, and somehow he was just very good at this. That WrestleMania match with Jerry Lawler was still horrendous, but there was something to it overall. Maybe it wasn't the total disaster it could have been, but it still wasn't great. Number 3, Jake Roberts in 1991. WWF fans didn't know what to make of this because talk about out of nowhere. Jake just turned on the Ultimate Warrior as he was getting ready to fight the Undertaker, and yep, he never looked back. If you weren't sold on it, that changed soon after because we got one of the most iconic bad guy moments ever. Roberts took his literal snake Damien and had him bite the Macho Man for real. And it was shocking. Go and look at the fans' faces. This in no way would have worked without Jake being over the moon that he got away with it, and the footage still gets shown today. I imagine it always will be. It also helped Roberts, as while he was a great mid-card good guy, this sort of felt like it promoted him to the #1 asshole. Some of the promos he cut too, he was unhinged. Sadly, personal problems cut this short, but even then, Jake knew what he was doing in hindsight. It was wonderful stuff. Number 2, Steve Austin in 2001. So this was crap in terms of business. You can't argue that. Numbers dropped, and those who had fallen in love with the WWF due to Stone Cold Steve Austin just stopped watching. They didn't care about nuance. They just wanted to see this guy kick somebody's ass, and that got taken away. The Rattlesnake himself has said this since too, but if you're a nerd like me, this fits the story. Austin had come back to the WWF and made it clear becoming the champion was everything, especially as The Rock had taken his spot. Therefore, he had become a bit nuts. In terms of character and performance too, we have talked about it before. This version of Stone Cold is hilarious and showed he had way more than just being a beer-swigging Texan. As he got more and more crazy, he could be genuinely funny too. If wrestling is about entertainment, Austin was top of the tree once again. So no, this wasn't popular, but it was worth trying. Maybe Steve was even correct as he thought 20 or so years ago. Continuing the babyface run would have petered out, and he wanted to be ahead of the game. It's hard to totally go with that line of thinking due to the drop-off, but as somebody who doesn't need to worry about the company's financials, this really was a thing of beauty. Number 1, Daniel Bryan in 2018. This was unheard of. After Daniel Bryan finally got the green light to wrestle again after being forced to retire, nobody ever thought he would go heel. But screw that, we were going to get there in double quick time. It was only 219 days when Bryan booted AJ Styles right in the balls, basically stole the WWE title in November. It also allowed Daniel to declare this was the new version of himself, and man, did he go and hit a home run. He soon became the Earth's champion as he yelled at us all for being fickle and for wrecking the world. My gosh, he was good at this. The sudden shift sort of helped too, because fans were so mad that WWE had dared to do this so fast. Bryan just leaned into that. He was going to take it all. The genius part came into play with the old wrestling adage of finding yourself and turning it up to 11. Everything Bryan was saying were his true thoughts, but amplified to an absurd degree. That irked fans. Do not tell me what to do. I still feel like WWE could have leaned into this harder, as Daniel was never really pitched as the man. But you know this guy. He makes the best of anything he's given, and he really is one of the greatest of all time. Is there anything better than a wrestling return? I don't think there is. In fact, if somebody told me that was my whole role in sports entertainment, I'd take it. The adrenaline, the pump, rewatching it on YouTube, it's the best. They hold so much power, WWE has brought some truly crazy people back in the past. Damn it, it worked. Sort of. I am Simon Miller though, and here's 10 that seemed absolutely nuts and then sort of worked themselves out. Number 10, Mabel in 1999. Even The Undertaker during recent interviews has said during the mid-90s he did not like working with Mabel. Why? Because he had a tendency to hurt people. In fact, Mabel's big push was stopped because he crushed the dead man's ribs. So when Vince McMahon made the decision to bring him back at the 1999 Royal Rumble, some people scratched their heads. Turned out it was in fact The Undertaker who had a role for him, because almost instantly his Ministry of Darkness druids kidnapped the big man and turned him into Viscera. He was going to be their bodyguard. Now it turned out this was actually a super smart move, because today this is the character he's best known for. The less is more shtick worked great, and maybe Nelson Frazier knew what it was like to lose his job the first time. Let's not do it again. I don't think later making him the world's largest love machine was a good plan, but hey, by that point he was pretty much re-established. So overall, this was a massive net positive. Number 9, the Headbangers in 2016. It sort of feels like Mosh and Thrasher don't get their plaudits these days. They were an important part of the Attitude Era, and they fit into the tag team scene nicely. And one day they were just gone. The gimmick had sort of aged out by 2016, which is why it was super strange when WWE brought them back. But let's look at the lay of the land. Nostalgia works for one, and the SmackDown tag team division desperately needed new teams. Bingo. I mean, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but Heath Slater and Rhino were the champions at the time, which was the ultimate in let's just throw two singles guys together and hope. Fans never buy it. So when the Headbangers did return, they felt like an actual unit, which is why WWE got rid of them way too soon. Once they had found their momentum, it absolutely would have worked. Instead, it was more something to do because we have to do something. I mean, you could have even involved their personalities down the line. I tell you, my friends, we did not give this one a chance. Number 8, the New Age Outlaws in 2014. This is very similar to our last entry. Why are Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg hanging around in 2014? Well, I'll tell you. People were very excited to see them. I suppose the surprise came in the fact the pair had made some cameos already, and we thought that was that. Then nope, from nowhere they were doing a full-time run. At the Royal Rumble, they even beat Cody Rhodes and Goldust for the tag titles, and man, nobody saw that coming, and it wasn't a short thing. They held on to those until March. The Usos eventually beat them for the belts, and that was it for the Outlaws, although they still did have jobs backstage. So it just worked, and likely helped Jimmy and Jay somewhat too. If they had overstayed their welcome, this may have been different, but they didn't. So I didn't need to say that. This was well balanced. Number 7, James Ellsworth in 2018. From surprisingly getting over after a Braun Strowman squash match to Carmelo whooping his ass in 2017 and sending him packing, James Ellsworth had quite the good run in WWE. He then shocked everybody when he returned in 2018. This was the Money in the Bank pay-per-view where Ellsworth ran in to help Carmella beat Asuka to retain the women's title. He was gone a month later, so this was very much used as a get-out-of-jail-free card. But look at it this way. James should have been Mella's long-term sidekick, and there was no need story-wise to stop it when we did. So getting a few more weeks out of the relationship did achieve this, and it protected Asuka. Never gonna get mad at that. She's all-time levels, and everybody should always be protecting Asuka. So, yeah, I do get it. In one way, it feels pointless, but on the other, it's better than some stupid finish where Carmella fakes a leg injury and then does a roll-up. That makes Asuka look stupid, so this one gets a tick. Number 6, the Big Boss Man in 1998. The Big Boss Man, or Ray Traylor, does not get the credit he is owed. Apart from being entertaining, people don't get how massive this dude was, yet he moved around effortlessly. Born to do it. Throughout 1997 into 1998, he was doing okay work in WCW, which is why when he returned to the WWF in October, fans were a bit confused. If you didn't watch World Championship Wrestling, it was the cartoon cop from the early 90s, and if you did, well yeah, he hadn't done all that much down there. I would assume that was on the company though, because in the role as McMahon's henchman, the Big Boss Man absolutely excelled. He was also a brawl machine, and when he won the hardcore title, he even made it feel a little bit more legitimate. The man was just perfect for the corporation too, and any time he was in the ring, he got the job done. Also, do you remember when he threw the nightstick at Survivor Series 1998? Even that was spot on. I love this guy. I can't even imagine the big old feud with Steve Austin without him, so can we please make some more noise about the Boss Man? He's just so good. Number 5, the Spirit Squad in 2016. So, as we always remember, the Spirit Squad was just Mikey and Kenny. There was nobody else. I mean, that's not true, but The Miz still did bring back these two people in their Spirit Squad gear to wind up Dolph Ziggler during their feud. Well, I actually thought it worked. I wouldn't say they had the ultimate nostalgia ping, but fans remembered these guys. They were so annoying they got heat. It didn't even matter it was just these two either, because it was enough to point and laugh at Dolph. Ha ha, this is what you used to do, what an idiot. It was a good use of storytelling too, to reward people that do watch all the time. And go back and check this out. It could have been over the top, but it wasn't. The Miz vs. Ziggler for the IC title was actually really intriguing because of moments like this. We allowed them to go all in. When it came to the mid-card, that wasn't always the case. Kenny Dykstra and Mike Mondo also just threw themselves into it because they did understand the assignment. Just gonna sum it up in a headline. I thought this was really entertaining. Number 4, The Big Show in 2020. So it's pandemic time, meaning things that would have been awful actually turned out to be wonderful. It was an odd period. I suppose you could put it down to desperation and the fact we had WrestleMania 36 in a flipping warehouse. Poor Drew McIntyre had his big WWE title moment in front of no one, and it was still great for him, but yeah, come on. Just a big fat no. To try and keep events interesting, the powers that be did think outside the box, or a box-like structure. So as we learned on Raw the next night, when Drew versus Brock Lesnar was over and done with, the Big Show had swanned to the ring. What? The Giant got under McIntyre's skin and got him to put his title on the line, with the story being that maybe, just maybe, the Scottish Warrior had one of the shortest reigns ever. It was also a Hail Mary for the Big Show. He needed to get back on track. It just meant there was something to continue this narrative in a world where we were trying to make sense of it. So no, it wasn't great, all things considered, but seeing Show return from nowhere after barely doing anything in 2020 actually got us through another week. That was the MO here. Let's just get it done as best we can. Number 3, Goldberg in 2024. This one was very recent, depending on when you watch this video. I mean, maybe it's 2079 and I sound like an idiot. It did happen at the Bad Blood pay-per-view that year, though, just after Triple H had revealed the Crown Jewel titles. Let's not talk about those. As we were in Atlanta, however, we had some wrestling legends in the crowd, one of which was Bill Goldberg. Makes sense. This was his turf. Because Gunther had marched out during this, though, he took a shot at Goldberg and called him a 3-minute merchant, and you can't do that. Bill was furious and stood up when 55,789 security guards ran out to stop them. Even then, though, the seeds had been planted. It's also now been confirmed that Goldberg will have his retirement match in 2025, and yeah, it should be Gunther. People get mad about this, but come on. We have 365 days of wrestling, and if we can have the Ring General and Bill just go nuts for a short amount of time before Gunther wins, great. I think that will be super fun. This segment was good too, and whether people like it or not, there's a lot of fans who do tune in when Bill is on the screen. You can also sell his last fight ever as a huge moment, and if you time that right, this momentum will just keep WWE going and going and going. So it's quite smart as far as I'm concerned, and shows that management are thinking about the future. Once again, there was a time that never happened. I am ready to go. Number 2, Nia Jax in 2023. I get grief from the crazies anytime I say this, but I do not care. It's true. Nia Jax's comeback has been great. She's just so good at being Nia Jax, and while that sounds ridiculous, it's a classic case of leaning into your strengths and seeing what happens. It is still accurate that at the 2023 Royal Rumble, a lot of people went, what? But ever since she settled back into her role, I think she's had her best run ever. That's awesome, it's what you want. Triple H just knows how to book her, and a world title win in 2024 has been a laugh riot. It's also going to help Tiffany Stratton as well, and that's wrestling, man. It's called the Circle of Life. She fits into the roster perfectly and adds something a little bit different. And if this does continue on the same track, Jax could even have a successful babyface run. She does have those chops too. Remember that feud with Alexa Bliss all those years ago? So there's loads we can do here. I am a fan. Number 1, Hulk Hogan in 2002. The last year of Hulk Hogan in WCW was awful. He was as much to blame as anybody else, and it meant that when there was a rumor WWE may be interested in 2002, nobody wanted it, not even the wrestlers. There's plenty of reports from the likes of The Rock and Steve Austin who didn't fancy Mr. Politics walking into the backstage area and causing a fuss. We still pulled the trigger in February at the No Way Out pay-per-view, and it was weird. The NWO pretended they were just here to make friends, and after that, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall didn't have the best time. The former Diesel struggled with injuries, whereas Razor Ramon never got over his personal issues. That was a real shame. What we learned during this period, however, is that Hulkamania had not died, and the old school WWF fan didn't care that Hogan had spent the last 7 years in WCW. They just remembered their childhood memories, so before long, somehow Hulk had become the biggest babyface ever, again. We all know the deal at WrestleMania 18, but that bled into a world title run, which wasn't actually a bad idea. It was almost willed into existence, but I tell you, that wasn't the general consensus at first, and after all was said and done, well, it was the right move. What Terry Bollea decided to do after this was horrendous, but in terms of his sports entertainment return, well, I think it probably worked out better than anybody expected. When you think about it, the WWE title hasn't changed hands that much. To earn this honor is still considered a big deal, and while there have been periods where we hot potatoed it, looking at you, Attitude Era, it is a prestigious prize. Let us keep it that way. On more than one occasion, it has totally baffled us when it came to new champions too, but you know what? These turned out alright. So I am Simon Miller. You've already seen the title. Let's roll. Number 10, JBL in 2004. I think the reason for the confusion is mainly because all of this was in fast forward. We were still getting our heads around Bradshaw becoming JBL when we got to the 2004 Great American Bash, and John defeated Eddie Guerrero for the WWE title. What the flub is happening? Well, I tell you, it turned out some really good booking. JBL was such an asshole, he was able to establish himself at the top of the card, especially because he always kept that championship by the skin of his teeth. It was purposefully infuriating. In later years, we learned Eddie had requested this too due to the pressure he felt as the man, and What did it all lead to? John Cena beating Layfield at WrestleMania 21 to move his rise to stardom into overdrive. So Bradshaw was just a necessary evil in this role, and he understood the assignment. Get other people over. His crazy long reign only helped with this, and while Cena would have made it anyway, it was a pretty good start. So yeah, fair play all around. Looking back, this was actually a huge success. Number 9, Sheamus in 2009. So the execution wasn't great again. Looking back, WWE may have needed this. Essentially in 2009, the WWE title had become trapped between John Cena and Randy Orton, and as is always the way, fans were getting a bit tired of it. It's nobody's fault, it's just what happens. It meant when Sheamus from nowhere won the big belt at the TLC pay-per-view, people were genuinely stunned. Message boards blew up as always. Such is life. It would have been better if we didn't over-rely on the table stipulation, which brought the Irishman the gold, but I'll tell you what it did do. It kept Sheamus near the top of the card forevermore. I mean, seriously, go through his whole career. While there are some lower moments, mostly he was always treated like a threat because he came in with a bang and he beat John Cena. It was still nuts that Sheamus went from ECW to Raw and achieved this so fast, but time has been kind to the decision, and again, WWE did feel a little bit predictable in 2009, so this at the very least was something to chat about. It kept you on your toes. Number 8, The Miz in 2021. A lot of people forget that The Miz basically stole Otis's Money in the Bank briefcase back in 2021, and then successfully cashed in on Drew McIntyre to become the WWE champion. I would assume it was down to the fact individuals were mad. Before this, The Miz had kind of been stuck in the mid-card. The details are super important here, however, because Drew had just won a grueling Elimination Chamber match, so having the A-lister steal away his glory was horrible. Whether WWE knew it or not, this was going to be a crucial act for McIntyre's big heel turn down the line, because it was the first of his many, well, that's very unfair moments. And sure, you can now say, well, that's just an accident, but who cares? WWE still used it and helped turn McIntyre into the beast he was in 2024. I mean, that was going to happen anyway. The fact we moved some of the chess pieces is great booking. Miz didn't hold it that long either because he dropped it to Bobby Lashley, so you could also get over that part pretty fast. I'm gonna say in hindsight, hell yeah, this really did work out in the long run. Number 7, John Cena in 2017. So remember this, a lot of people losing their minds for John Cena's 2025 retirement tour were definitely mad about what happened here, so we've got in reverse. Cena has lived long enough to become the hero. At the Royal Rumble of this year though, John Cena did defeat AJ Styles to win back the WWE title, and do you know why this ruled? Because it brought the man who can't be seen to 16 reigns. If we didn't do this, he wouldn't be in the position he will be during his final run, where, yep, he may actually get to number 17 and stand atop of the mountain. So sure, you may have been upset at the time, but it worked out overall. I think Cena's retirement is going to be twice as fun because WWE at the very least will tease it. I tell you this too, I would pull the trigger. If anybody deserves to have this accolade, it's this guy. He couldn't have given any more if he tried, and wrestling is about making you happy. John doesn't need to hold it that long either. You could probably even change your mind after a week. So yeah, I am totally good with it. Number 6, Brock Lesnar in 2019. Let me make this clear. Brock Lesnar beating Kofi Kingston for the WWE title on the Fox debut of SmackDown sucked. It sucked then, it sucked now. Kofi should still be livid. It's so bad. Which begs the question, why is it in this list? Well, obviously, I'm going to tell you. Because the fact of the matter is, WWE was going to do this regardless. There was nothing we could do. Kingston only got the nod through some mad circumstances, and we've seen that before. Rey Mysterio, CM Punk, Daniel Bryan. They get to the promised land, and then Vince McMahon treated them like idiots. With all that in mind, this was the best way to get it done. Just pull the band-aid off. WWE was never going to let Kofi show any sort of dominance against Lesnar, so rather than see him mauled for 10 minutes, just remind me how stupid wrestling can be. This was also the year of that Hell in a Cell match. It was a bad time. There's also the fact it did get a lot of people talking, which was the idea, so in that sense, I suppose it was a success. By that logic, though, we could have had Repo Man win the belt. The chatter would have been just as loud, especially from me. It also pissed enough people off that they were overjoyed when Drew McIntyre dethroned the Beast down the line, so it did have a payoff. But yeah, I will never forget Kofi. You are the best. Number 5, The Big Show in 2002. Given we have just chatted about that, let's reverse the mindset because yeah, back in 2002, people felt the same way about Lesnar himself. Time is weird. 2002 was Brock's breakout year though, and the man was a menace. He got over so fast because he was a killer, and he won the WWE title from The Rock at SummerSlam. There was no going back. It's why when he faced the Big Show at that year's Survivor Series, we all thought it was a foregone conclusion. The Giant wasn't doing much at that point, so he could just be a mammoth man for Lesnar to beat. And then Brock lost. Whoops. Thankfully, there was a reason. Firstly, WWE wanted to turn Lesnar face because he was getting cheered anyway, and during this, Paul Heyman turned on his friend and joined the Big Show, which was the main reason the belt switched hands. So yeah, I get that fine. It also allowed Kurt Angle to win the title from Big Show at Armageddon because WWE had already booked WrestleMania 19, which was going to be Angle versus Lesnar. As they wanted Brock to get the big victory there though, somebody had to beat him beforehand, so yeah. Paul White wasn't the worst choice. That man is huge. In essence, we basically created a buffer zone with this, and actually seeing it play out wasn't half bad. Almost like if you know where you're going, you can go and get away with anything. Number 4, Kane in 1998. This one is hilarious. 24 hours Kane was the WWF champion. That's right, one day. We all forget about this because it came at the 1998 King of the Ring, and yeah, that was the night of Undertaker versus Mankind, Hell in a Cell. Human beings were being thrown off cages. Nothing else was gonna stick. It was a huge surprise though, because this pay-per-view was in June, meaning Stone Cold Steve Austin had only held the gold for 3 months. Think of that. It's not like his popularity was waning either. He was more over than ever. It meant everybody was shocked when the Big Red Machine drew first blood in the First Blood match. Even more so if you were in the know. Kane had only been born to have a feud with Taker, and now he was the man. Do you want to know why we did this, however? Well, of course, it was to keep the fans on their toes, but the WWF also knew they had to keep firing shots in the Monday Night TV ratings war. And what happened on the next week's Raw? The rematch was made very public, and Austin won his gold back. And that match got all the viewers. Kane was such a beast he got away with it too, so this was very smart, and overall likely helped the World Wrestling Federation claw their way back to the top. There's always ways and means. Number 3, Hulk Hogan in 1993. Nope, I am not giving this one a free pass. This is also one of the worst moments in WWE history. Dumb, really dumb. If you don't know, this followed WrestleMania 9 when Hulk Hogan walked to the ring after Bret Hart had been screwed out of the WWE title thanks to Yokozuna, and he had an impromptu match. Hogan then won in seconds and was the champion. Even now I can't believe it. This only served one person. Or maybe 2. Because the reason this happened was down to the fact that WWF business wasn't doing very good. In a panic, Vince McMahon felt like he needed to see if there was life in Hulkamania, a decision he thought he'd already made years prior. He decided the tide had turned and we were done with all of that, but when numbers started going the wrong way, well, I guess you have to try. So we pulled the trigger super early and gave the gold back to Hulk, and you know what it told us? Nope, we are past that peak. By that year's King of the Ring, Hogan was gone again. Now with hindsight, WWE should have used this to turn Hulk Hogan heel, as we know that would have been the secret sauce. But given Hulk's enjoyment of politics, this was actually the best of a bad situation. The championship was always going to go back to him at some point. Doing it this way was the fastest route to tell us it was not the answer. So while as a fan I do not like it, business-wise I can understand it. We still could have waited till Raw though, although that wasn't how the show worked back then. In fact, it barely carried any weight at all. Number 2, Hulk Hogan in 2002. This one was different, however. I don't think we had much of a choice. It was all off the back of that WrestleMania 18 match with The Rock, and we know the deal. The fans decided on that night they wanted pure nostalgia and cheered Hogan like it was 1984. Even with all the awfulness since, it remains very special. It was the timing that was fascinating because on that show, Triple H capped off his big comeback by defeating Chris Jericho to become the WWE champion. That had been the direction ever since he returned in January, when we got to Backlash and he lost. To Hogan, it was totally surreal. It didn't last long because this hysteria was always going to be short-lived. That's why it was good that WWE capitalized on it when they could. What they should do when young upstarts get over. Why not even when it's the other way around? If you had just ignored it, you would have lost the magic faster, and yeah, within a couple of months Hulk had lost the belt anyway, and this made a lot of fans happy at the time. As we have talked about a lot, that is the idea of professional wrestling. Number 1, Bob Backlund in 1994. Talk about out of nowhere decisions. This was wild. For starters, nobody thought Bob Backlund was even going to return to the WWF in 1994, especially because the tagline was the new generation. Bob was the total opposite. He was as old school as they came. Now, actually, after this, everybody involved smartened up and turned Backlund into a crazy heel that was a lot of fun. But why on earth did we have him beat Bret Hart for the gold at the Survivor Series? Well, once again, I'm going to tell you. Once again, the powers that be will look into the future and realize they needed to light a fire under Owen Hart. Therefore, he screwed his brother over here, which made him into a right monster. And what happened a few days later on a house show? Diesel beat Bob to become the champion, so we are moving the pieces around again. It really would have been risky to have had Big Daddy Cool do this over the Hitman because Bret was so beloved, and doing it this way got Owen heat as the siblings continued their awesome feud. It also told the audience, you should come to our live events, you don't know what's gonna happen. Diesel was also mega over at this point as well, so it was the right thing to try. And while that didn't work out as intended, that was mainly because Vince McMahon instantly tried to turn Kevin Nash into Hulk Hogan. That part was stupid. So the rage of the time was fair, but sitting down with it now, it's actually quite entertaining booking and the type of risks people could take today. It all worked out in the end, and everybody had something new to do. I say, good. I am dumb and I like dumb things. I'm sorry. Wrestling is the same, although at times it does feel like they're not in control. I think it comes down to the fact there's so much content on TV. On occasion, promoters can't contain their inner madness. A broken clock is right twice a day, though, so I am Simon Miller, and here's 10 dumb WWE stories that turned out to be genius. Sort of. Number 10, R-Truth and the 24/7 title. Remember this! No matter what you thought about the 24/7 title, it was going to happen regardless. You couldn't wish it out of existence, so thank goodness for R-Truth. He decided this championship would become his baby, and man, he hit home runs every single week when it came to goofy wrestling for life greatness. It wasn't like anyone was pretending this was serious content, and the wonderful ridiculousness actually broke up Raw, I thought. Do you remember that time Truth was on the beach and he was being chased? He still got away with the gold. It was just a nice reminder that anything can work if you give it 100%. And R-Truth, as far as I'm concerned, is a national treasure. But given I'm saying this from the UK, you can upgrade that to international. Number 9, Karma melts the Undertaker's powers. 1995 was utter wackiness in the WWF. Even workers like Bret Hart and Jean-Pierre Lafitte were feuding over a jacket, and yes, you heard that right, clothes. It was just what Vince McMahon thought was good for business, and he was totally wrong. But a few of these stories were alright. Let's talk about Karma. If you don't know, this was Charles Wright, who would go on to play Papa Shango and The Godfather, whereas here he was sort of an MMA fighter. So really, we were ahead of the game. To try and win the mind games as he started a program with The Undertaker though, Karma stole Paul Bearer's urn and he melted it. That's right. Manager Ted DiBiase justified this because he deduced that this was the source of Taker's powers, so let's just take it away. Karma was nuts too, so he used this melted gold to make a necklace that he wore around his neck. I tell you, this is pretty good. Of course, the WWF couldn't help it and sold it like the magic had now shifted hands, but hey, if I saw a movie, I'd expect that. This was actually well thought out, especially for the time. It was way better than Undertaker vs. Undertaker from the previous year. Although again, when you were a kid, that was the best thing ever. Wrestling is stupid. Number 8, Edge gets kicked out to the Judgment Day. So this one needed a little bit of hindsight, but that's okay. Sometimes a good story needs time to sell. It was weird at first because Edge had only just started the Judgment Day, recruited Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest, when Finn Balor joined and the rest betrayed him. First, it felt like the whole thing had been rushed. We just had to be patient though, because soon Rhea went and corrupted Dominic Mysterio, who also turned on his dad, and it was obvious. They all had great chemistry, and also were getting more over thanks to the group. That's the whole point. We then did the same thing again when JD McDonough arrived, but that worked too, and really the entire angle has been treated fantastically well. The Judgment Day are going to be remembered as one of the best stables of modern times, and it made 2 of the members world champions. Again, this is exactly the idea. I do believe this is great stuff. Number 7, Bray Wyatt possessed other wrestlers. WWE did not know what to do with The Fiend. They also didn't know what to do with the Eater of Worlds version of Bray Wyatt, although actually, I give them a pass. I think the man behind all this was just too creative for WWE. he was something else. One idea he did get through was that he could corrupt other wrestlers' brains, which is what we saw when he turned his attentions to Alexa Bliss. Now, I will be the first to say I thought the execution was a bit off, as Alexa hung around with a doll called Lily, and it was just a bit too B-horror movie. The thing is, the core concept was awesome. Wyatt was now possessing his enemies and making him their friends. That's good eating. The fact Bray played this like he didn't want to as well but couldn't control himself was the icing on the top. And again, I just think he was too imaginative for the world he found himself in. That man was a damn hero. Number 6, Randy Orton uses IED as an excuse. I worry when WWE focuses on mentally related subjects. They can be very heavy-handed, as can wrestling in general. If something needs nuance, smash it over the head instead. So back in 2009, when Randy Orton started to say his violent behavior was due to IED, or intermittent explosive disorder, the worry was real. Actually, it worked out okay. This was when the Viper would pump people in the head because why not, and took it all the way as he wrecked Stephanie McMahon as Triple H was handcuffed to the ropes. That's screwed up. Because Randy played all this straight, however, it actually made the whole character terrifying. He sold it with his facial expressions too, and commentary was disgusted. How dare Orton act this way and try and blame it on something else? So really this was quite deep, and we didn't actually poke fun at anything. So if we did do it again, yeah, this is the template. It worked. Number 5, the custody of Dominic. I mean, this one has become a classic. It's also totally unhinged. 2 wrestlers fighting in a ladder match for custody of a child. Forget about the legal ramifications. Why did anybody agree to this in the first place? It was pure sports entertainment though, as Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio met at SummerSlam 2005 in a ladder match because Eddie had kept telling people he was Dominic's real dad. Rey was just an imposter. Guerrero had a whole story too about the Mysterios coming to him to help them get pregnant. So for a while, we actually acted like this could be true. It was so preposterous. That was the genius, however, because not only did Eddie and Rey have a great fight, but over the years it's kind of become a niche cult classic. Ridiculous for sure, but there's an element of fun you just can't ignore. That rhymes, so it must be true. The fact Dom is now in the ring too has just made it even better. And even if you did hate it, there's a reason people smile when they talk about it today. It's a moment in time. A dumb one, that's alright. Dumb can be okay. Number 4, Rikishi wants The Rock to succeed. So this did not work. There's no point pretending otherwise. After Steve Austin was run over at the 1999 Survivor Series, though, we had a whodunit on our hands when we found the would-be killer was Rikishi. Oh, there was nothing wrong with sending Rikishi to the main event because that guy was super over, but nobody wanted to see him as a heel, and furthermore, his excuse sucked. He did it for The Rock. When The Rock arrived and said, no, you didn't, then it turned out Triple H was pulling the strings the whole time. It's just a mess. If we had just stuck to the basic story, this may have sparked something, because Rikishi's big point was WWE had 2 megastars, and yet the company kept going back to Stone Cold over the Great One. There was then some racist undertones which sort of knocked it off course again, but the idea that Austin and Rock were too big for one promotion was a good one, which just played out terribly. We even had the right plan because Rikishi was going to get his push on top of this. Let's just sum it up in a sentence. We dropped the ball for sure. Number 3, Vince McMahon's limousine explosion. Another story that was ridiculous. The hell we killing Mr. McMahon on wrestling TV? Just don't go there to begin with. That is how I felt at the time, but sure, if we take all television drama as just that, you kill people off, especially soap operas, my gosh. Nobody can survive even a season. In 2007, Vince McMahon did want to leave the show because he thought he was too old, and to stop anybody talking him back into it, he decided to blow himself up in a limo. Yeah, that'll do it. It was so well done, or people are so dumb, folk even rang up WWE HQ to make sure everything was okay. And of course, all of this was dropped due to the horrific Benoit family murders. That was the right move. The truth, however, is that if we had kept this up, it likely would have worked. Whodunits always draw people in, and this was somebody at the top of the card. Furthermore, whoever was chosen to be the guilty party could have made their career out of it. You need the machine behind you, but it's all there. It was still controversial, which I'm sure was intentional, but we have seen it work before. Although, actually, WWE would have screwed it up most probably. I mean, Exhibit A, the higher power. Number 2, Mr. McMahon's illegitimate son. And it's kind of the same for this story too. Again, what we saw on TV sucked. It was all because Mr. Kennedy, Kennedy was meant to be in this spot, but when he ran afoul of seemingly everybody, he was let go. So that was the end of that, but the narrative had already started. Somebody needed to be the damn son. As always, McMahon decided as they were in a crisis, comedy would sort this out, so chose Hornswoggle, simply because a leprechaun being his offspring was funny. Sure. Yeah, why not? If we go back to the original idea, however, yeah, it's slightly over the top, but I assume Kennedy was going to use this to become the world champion, and then we'd all be raving about it. We made a new star. So it really is a sliding doors moment and something WWE could revisit if they wanted to. At the same time, please know, it will likely still go off the rails. Number 1, Goldust torments Booker T. Sometimes dumb is the intent and dumb is the one. Let's go back to 2002. Goldust had decided that Booker T was the perfect new friend and tag team partner, so did everything he could to win him over. The skits between these two were ridiculous, but Dustin Rhodes was always up for anything, and Booker T understood wrestling entertainment better than anyone. That guy does not get his due. We saw it grow as well, because at first Booker couldn't stand Goldust or this nonsense, until his strong exterior was broken down, and yeah, it turned out he had a heart and a soft spot for his new buddy. That's just lovely. It also allowed the 5-time WCW champion to show off his range, which I bet put him in Vince McMahon's good books. And when they won the tag titles, my gosh, you would think Steve Austin had just walked out at WrestleMania 17. So it helped Booker progress in WWE and had a real charm to it, because it was real, sort of. Everybody has been won over by someone who was a little overbearing at first. It's just simple storytelling. Even if they would wear wigs and recite really weird poetry, I am gonna call it good stuff. A bald guy who positively reviews wrestling shows on the internet. Sounds rubbish, right? That's life. Sometimes you can write things down on paper and they shouldn't work, yet somehow they take off. It's been this way with wrestling for years too, an idea which should be horrible clicks and becomes awesome. So I am Simon Miller, welcome my friends. Let's run down 10 of these right now. Number 10, the Stooges. So let's get 2 legendary old-timers and have them play idiots next to Vince McMahon. I'm sure some people were livid when they first heard this. The secret sauce was how Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe approached the role, though. There was no ego, there was no second guessing. They threw themselves into it with so much gusto, it was hilarious. They were essentially jesters, they took bumps for anyone and everyone, and they even fell out from time to time. Plus there was that mini feud with the Mean Street Posse. This was just good stuff. It worked too as the fans gravitated towards it after a while. Good is good. And in terms of making yourself work in a different era, boom! This is the way. Number 9, Mandy Rose goes to NXT. This was seen as a demotion at first, but no. If anything, Mandy Rose opened the door to prove going back to NXT can serve as the best career resurgence. This was July 2021, and Mandy had been doing okay on the main roster. WWE had sort of pigeonholed her, and the story with Otis had run out of steam mostly due to the pandemic. Couldn't pay it off properly. As soon as Rose returned to the 3rd brand, though, it just worked. Not only did she improve in the ring and on the mic, she totally updated her character. What was the end result? A huge NXT women's title run that everybody thought was pretty damn good. Rose also had the group Toxic Attraction, which helped others along the way, and of course the only reason this ended was due to the company and Mandy falling out over her outside activities. Looking back now, though, there was nothing readily available for her on Raw or SmackDown, so she bet on herself, and it was the perfect shift. More wrestlers who need something new should do this. Again, it just showed us a different way. Number 8, Ted DiBiase finds The Undertaker. So this didn't really play out on TV the way it was meant to, or at least the SummerSlam 1994 main event missed the mark. I get that, but people forget this. I still love it because I was basically a fetus when I first witnessed this. 2 Undertakers was the best thing ever. If we go to the Bruce Pritchard podcast, though, he claims when this story started, it was meant to be Ted DiBiase going out there and finding a darker version of the dead man. It was just a bit odd, he was pretty damn dark. So when the WWF pivoted and said that actually the $1 Million Man believed his own hype and riches so much that he could convert someone to become an even better phenom, yeah, that works. It's actually more layered. It means multiple people had a stake in this. It was essentially telling you that Ted was drunk on power, so much so he truly thought after the OG Undertaker had turned his back, he could just manipulate a new one. It just summed up what he did throughout his World Wrestling Federation career. Money will get you anything. Again, this doesn't really come across when you go back and check it out, but this was the concept. Not so bad when you do it that way. I mean, it doesn't explain why Leslie Nielsen was trying to sort this come SummerSlam. WWF was just a bit weird back then. Number 7, Drew McIntyre fails in Wales. You need everything that happened afterwards to make this work, but hey, it did happen. Whether WWE planned it or retconned it, it doesn't matter. Nowadays, it feels like a home run. But some people, very understandably, were livid that Drew McIntyre failed to beat Roman Reigns at Clash at the Castle 2022. It seemed so obvious given we were in his fake hometown of Wales, but no. WWE decided to expand the bloodline as Solo Sikoa made his main roster debut, and the rest is history. Look at it now, though. This was the catalyst for the Scottish Warrior starting to lose his mind, as despite constant screw jobs, nobody cares. If that's how things were gonna be, he would take matters into his own hands, as he became the best version of himself ever. He hit some career highs. Without this and other sad moments, he wouldn't have the justification needed to become the ultimate Drew McIntyre. That's way better than an admittedly cool title win, which likely would have been over a few weeks after pulling the trigger. It also opened the door for this excellent feud with CM Punk, so bravo all round. This has been some top tier storytelling from WWE and Drew, and it can kind of all be traced back to here. No idea if it was meant to happen, but it's still a pat on the back for those that were involved. You can only use what you have, and yeah, we used it and then some. Number 6, Drew McIntyre fails in Scotland, which helped here too. It's like a story in 2 acts. This one is arguably more controversial because Drew had become his final form by this stage, and he could have won the world title. Nobody would have blinked. Instead, not only did we hark back to the first Clash at the Castle, we made it 10 times more painful, as McIntyre was screwed again, this time by CM Punk. It was even more hard-hitting here too. We were in Drew's proper hometown. Look where we got to, though. Would we have bought into the Punk McIntyre Hell in a Cell as much without these beats? I don't think so. There's a reason WWE brought back the Bad Blood name. It's because Triple H knew he had this feud in his pocket, ticked all the boxes. To get there, though, we had to introduce proper rage, which is why McIntyre got ruined here, and CM Punk kept getting ruined in Chicago. Doesn't take a genius. We just went the most obvious and emotional route. I suppose the best part is the trust you can now have in WWE storytelling. They do know where they're going, and you'll get that payoff. As awful as it sounds to say, we can just sit back and enjoy the ride. For once, they may actually be telling the truth. Finally. Number 5, Eric Bischoff gives Triple H the new world title. I do get if this one still annoys you. We certainly could have done more, and Triple H just getting a brand new world championship made it feel less important at first. It's just how it works. This was September 2002, and fans were livid at the game for what they deemed to be ruling Raw with an iron fist, which is why the then WWE did this. Just go and watch any Triple H promo after the fact. He didn't shy away from it. He mentioned it over and over to piss the audience off even more. It worked. He was grinning right in the face of the haters. So the mistake part in this actually comes from the fact that nobody came in to wreck Hunter, which is what Booker T should have done a few months later. But the idea of an asshole getting a freebie and reveling in it, that's old school wrestling story. We just forgot the last part. RVD, Shawn Michaels, and Goldberg were all in his position too to ram it back down Triple H's throat, but yeah. This is where it does get a little bit messy. In terms of going to it to begin with, however, I think it would have been fine. 2 bad people just doing bad things. Number 4, Hulk Hogan's WrestleMania 9 win. So you will never get me on board with this. It was stupid then, and it's even more stupid now. While I'm sure Hogan was also begging Vince McMahon to let him walk out after the Mania 9 main event to win the world title from Yokozuna, McMahon could have said no. He didn't. Ultimately, this was his choice. If we go back to this idea on paper too, sure, I get it. The WWF needed a kick up the backside because business was not good, so why not bring back the former hero and have him shockingly become the world champion again? You can see the logic. Fans of the night loved it too because we all want to be a part of a shock, so once again, it was the fallout here which was even more awful. Hogan should have used this and his star power to help Bret Hart and Yoko reach new levels, but he did not. He went back to task and put himself first, so within days the audience was done with this. They didn't really want to go back to the 80s. It meant Vince was just buying himself some time, and he knew that too. That's why when we got to that year's King of the Ring, we undid all of this and put the title back on Zunes. And soon after, Hulk went to WCW. None of this was a fluke. If we had Hulkamania finally fall to a badass heel, the conversation around this would have been night and day. Hogan couldn't help himself though, so yeah, this was rubbish and always will be. Number 3, Cody Rhodes steps aside for The Rock. So this was not planned, it was happy happenstance, but hey, works, it works. Soon after the Royal Rumble though, winner Cody Rhodes did indeed sacrifice his world title shot against Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 40, because apparently The Rock wanted first dibs. Basically how it was explained to us. It was out of Cody's hands as management had spoken, and yeah, I get it. The Rock is one of the biggest stars in the world. If you can get him on Mania, you probably should. It was still a huge shame because fans like you and me felt bad for Rhodes. He had worked his butt off for 2 years and the story investment was there. We'd all bought into this idea that now was the time to finish his story, and that's mostly because it was. Within 2 days, social media had exploded with "We Want Cody" hashtags, to the point it was obvious WWE couldn't carry on with this. The last match at Mania 40 now ran the risk of getting a reaction nobody wanted, including the great one. As such, and WWE talked about this on that YouTube documentary, they made a huge pivot, turned The Rock heel, he teamed up with Roman Reigns. The whole thing was way better than whatever we had planned. This was truly awesome stuff. It also breathed new life into Rocky, who, as it turned out, benefited from it all. And I think we've probably got our setup for Mania 41's main event too. The American Nightmare versus the Final Boss. That rules. There's always been a rumor out there too that before CM Punk got injured at the Royal Rumble, we were going to have the Bloodline injure Cody to the point he wouldn't have competed at Mania at all. Man, if that's true, there would have been riots. Thankfully, life stopped that too, and yeah, what we got was the best of all scenarios. So no matter how we got there, excellent stuff. We talked about for a long time, and fair play to all involved for seeing it through. They knew what they had to do. Eventually. Number 2, Steve Austin joins the alliance. So Steve Austin going heel was a mistake all round. Fans knew this, he knew this, my nan knew this. It did give us unhinged Stone Cold, which was awesome, but in terms of a business decision, bad. There was a bizarre upside to this though, and that was in the fact that after a few months an obvious story popped up. How do we get the old rattlesnake back? WWE leaned into this, and we even had some over-the-top wonderful production videos asking that question. So when he finally did leave all of this behind, people were happy. I mean, a large part of the fan base had left by this point, so you can't say it was good. We're talking about dumb booking decisions that didn't just tank everything. This was the positive. I suppose you could argue that Austin sticking to the same course early 2001 would have resulted in a certain staleness too. I don't believe that, but Steve did. He gets wrestling way more than I do. Of course, we shall never know, but at least we had that amazing video package with Vince McMahon asking for the old Stone Cold. And if you haven't seen that, change that today. Number 1, Brock Lesnar loses in his first match back in WWE. I mean, this was nuts. It was 2012, though, during Extreme Rules, when Brock fought John Cena in a proper violent fight and was defeated. Felt weird, especially because Lesnar had just returned from the UFC. If he's going to be in a match where anything goes, surely he has to win. No. The real reason management did this was to teach Brock a lesson for leaving all those years ago, and yes, that is stupid. That's why the Triple H feud was all over the place too. Thankfully, Lesnar had an ace in the hole, however. His name was Paul Heyman. Always happy to make lemonade from lemons, Heyman started cutting promos saying this was the worst thing that could have happened to the locker room because Brock was even more dangerous now. His pride had been wounded. We still needed the Undertaker win at WrestleMania 30 to turn him into this beast, which is a hill I'll die on, but again, if WWE was always going to have Lesnar lose day 1, this was exactly the way to sort it out after the fact. Sometimes, though, maybe just don't make it so hard and have the dude you want to push win a lot of matches. We are talking about dumb things again, which is my favorite topic. We have done stories and angles though, so today let's talk about some signings. Names that got the nod and the fan base shouted, "What?" And it all worked out okay. So I am Simon Miller, and you know what? Let's right some of these debutante wrongs. Number 10, the Mean Street Posse. So during the height of the Attitude Era in 1999, the WWF signed the Mean Street Posse. On paper, this sounds nuts. Now, Joey Abs was a trained wrestler, but Pete Gas and Rodney were legit friends of Shane McMahon. Now they were on TV. How did this happen? Well, nepotism, but still. They, of course, were just stooges for Shane, but something wonderful happened soon after. All of this worked, and I mean it. The trio got serious heat as they bumped their ass off for their buddy, and the amount of times they helped McMahon win genuinely riled up the crowd. They also totally understood their roles, so were very entertaining. This was really good. So yes, it sounds dumb, but you gotta watch it play out. And even today, people talk about the Mean Street Posse with genuine love and affection. That's crazy, but man, it was the best, mostly as wrestling never makes sense. Number 9, Goldberg. So this was 2016, and I actually don't think too many people minded. Enough time had passed. It was fun to see Bill Goldberg again. The issue and worry was when he was last in WWE, it had not gone well, because Goldberg and management did not see eye to eye. I get that too. Vince McMahon wanted Bill to work longer matches, and no fan wanted that. We all knew what made Bill work. For whatever reason, somebody had learned though, and man, this ruled. Go back to that Survivor Series. Word is it was Brock Lesnar's idea, but within 1 minute and 32 seconds, Goldberg had run through the beast and left the world stunned. It was awesome. That led to their WrestleMania 33 match 2, which could be the best 5-minute fight ever. And all of this was just fun. Sort of went badly after this as we got carried away, but this 6-month period was perfect and made up for what we did back in 2003. It just goes to show you don't have to overthink things. Do what works. That's it, and it's wrestling in a nutshell. It's not hard. Number 8, Raven. Word has always been Vince McMahon did not like Scott Levy. Who knows why? When Raven returned to the company in 2000, the rumor has always been McMahon asking Jim Ross, who the hell rehired that guy? JR had an answer. He had been super over, so why don't we do something with him? This was true too, and while the machine never got properly behind him, he was a solid part of the hardcore division, and every single thing he did worked. You'd have to imagine even Vince admitted his errors eventually because Raven was used a lot for a good couple of years. Plus, yes, it hurt ECW. You never want to see that, but McMahon did. And look what happened the year after. Wrestling would never be the same again. Number 7, the Public Enemy. Johnny Grunge and Rocco Rock lasted 1 month with the WWF. Whoops. This was 1999, and after running afoul of backstage politics, they were rejected from the company and went back to ECW. They then joined WCW, and that wasn't very good either. As some will remember, they loved tables too, so they did help usher in a new era, whether they realized it or not, because they helped lay the foundations for the Dudley Boys. This is because it was the APA who had beaten the Public Enemy out of the promotion, so when Bubba Ray and Devon joined, they had a ready-made story. We came from the same place, we have a similar attitude, but we're not going to leave as easily as the last guys. So it was accidental genius, and when they started hurling people through these tables, the fans ate it up. I'm sure this would have happened eventually, but it did help no end. Somebody had to fail for others to succeed in their place. Number 6, Mick Foley. Do you want to know how much Vince McMahon didn't want to hire Mick Foley? He told Jim Ross he was only doing it to prove that JR had no idea what he was talking about. The man is insane. Ross did actually know what he was doing, and even though Cactus Jack got transformed into Mankind, Foley understood characterization in wrestling to such a degree, he went and figured it out. He also gave The Undertaker his best feud in years, and in many ways revived that persona too. Mick was always a huge asset. As we know, he also made his matches feel dangerous, which the World Wrestling Federation also needed in 1996, and look what eventually happened. Foley became one of Vince's closest confidants. That doesn't happen by fluke. Even McMahon saw the genius here, and today Mick is one of the best of all time at what he did. I mean that too. He remains supremely underrated. Number 5, the New World Order. In 2002, we're talking about Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall re-signing with WWE. The rest of the roster was flabbergasted by this, and they'd all seen what this trio had done in WCW behind the scenes. Nobody wanted that. 3 known troublemakers coming back to wind everybody up. The issue was we were past the invasion angle, which hadn't been great, and the company needed something new. Nash, Hall, and Hogan were megastars, so it was always going to happen, and at first the story was they were there to kill the promotion. McMahon was sick of Ric Flair's dual ownership, so the NWO could now take everything down. It didn't happen, so you can say the story didn't work, but something else did. The WWE fan base remembered that Hulk was a pivotal part of their childhood, so cheered him like it was 1985. We got carried away as Hogan won the title, but before that, this helped no end. And of course, we got that classic match at WrestleMania 18 with The Rock. So it's hard to say this signing was stupid in hindsight. It actually gave the WWE a shot of adrenaline it desperately needed. It went bad eventually because Hogan can't help himself, but still, for a few months most people agreed this was excellent. Number 4, Bob Backlund. Everybody was baffled when Bob Backlund returned to the WWF in 1992. He looked like a PE teacher as he wore a tracksuit and didn't seem to fit at all given the catchphrase at the time was the new generation. Bob felt like anything but, especially as he wrestled right out of the 80s. That was his era. What shifted though is that the company and Backlund realized this, so switched gears, man, This was great. From nowhere, the former WWF champion became totally unhinged and delusional and just wanted to take his frustrations out on the younger generation. He even won the title again, which wasn't the best idea, but it did reintroduce the feeling that anything can happen. If you go back and watch it now, it really does take off in a way that nobody saw coming. It was like, please hate me because I am so uncool. Backlund was an absolute treat. Number 3, Lord Tensai. This one is a little bit of a stretch, but stay with me. When Matt Bloom was brought back to WWE in 2012, it was awful. The man was straddled with the Lord Tensai gimmick, which was never going to work. The entire audience knew he used to be Albert, so shouted Albert at him constantly. It also ignored the great work he had done in Japan, where he had totally reinvented himself, but look what happened afterwards. This is why the signing was genius. After the NXT system was rejiggled around, somebody needed to be moved into the head trainer role, and Bloom got the nod. Turned out he was awesome at this, and he is still there today with people around him shouting from the rooftops how effective he is. The new recruits love this guy, as does management. I don't think anybody saw that when he returned over a decade ago, but honestly, the whole structure could be completely different without him. Matthew found his calling after the ring, and he's been hitting home runs ever since. Number 2, Nia Jax. There was certainly some surprise when Nia Jax was released in 2021, and then more surprise when she returned in 2023. That's the wrestling fan base for you. Jax made her comeback in the Royal Rumble that year, and I'm not sure if people knew what to expect, but Triple H had a plan. He was going to make this Nia the best version yet. Mission success. Because not only has Jax improved all around, but she totally understands her role. You're never going to get anything outside of her wheelhouse, but who cares? It just means you know what to expect, and she's gotten really good at it. Her overall character is way better too, and she has been a huge asset to SmackDown after winning the title in 2024. I assume she's only going to improve too. So this has been really great. More power to her. Number 1, Logan Paul. I mean, this is still controversial today. If you know, you know. It doesn't mean you just forget about what's happening outside of the wrestling world. But when WWE did sign Logan Paul in 2021, eyebrows were raised. What were we doing, and what was the point other than serious social media power? Well, for one reason or another, Paul took this way more seriously than expected, and yep, he got really good. Quality matches with Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, Rey Mysterio, and Kevin Owens surprised a lot of people, and I would guess Logan is only going to improve if he carries on this path. I mean, it barely makes any sense. And sure, Paul gets to rehearse all his matches beforehand, but to perform at his level is still crazy. Not everyone can do that, and he really was a surprise package. It is proper 2 + 2 = potato. There's also constant teases that Logan Paul may take this on full time one day, and if he does and dedicates himself to the sport, well, who the hell knows where the bar is? That's quite a scary thought. We shall wait and see. I like dumb stuff. If you don't know, people get mad at that, but I can't help my brain. Wrestling still somehow seems to push the limits with that, though, because my gosh, the ideas that have come our way over the years. You know what, though? Even then, sometimes WWE does get it right. So I am Simon Miller. Here's the dumbest of dumb ways that were actually genius. Number 10, the Crybaby match. I mean, listen to the name. Doesn't exactly scream WrestleMania main event, does it? Back in the day, people tore lumps out of this thing too. They hated it. It was from 1996 in the In Your House 6 pay-per-view where, yeah, Razor Ramon defeated the 1-2-3 Kid, and as punishment for losing, the Kid got dressed up like a baby. Well, we just covered him in talcum powder, which apparently was the same. I went and watched this today, though, and yeah, it's fine. The silly stuff only comes after the match is done, and the work itself is great. Of course it was. Scott Hall and Sean Waltman are excellent. What the critics ignore is that Kid had actually been acting like a brat before all this, so he had justification too, and ultimately he got his. I thought that's what wrestling was meant to be. I would understand more if they were in diapers or there was a dummy on a pole or something, but no. It was just some goofy aftermath to embarrass the bad guy. Again, that was his job. So you don't have to like it due to your own taste, but an all-out disaster? No way. Number 9, the shortest Royal Rumble ever. What is the worst Royal Rumble? Most people will say the greatest Royal Rumble ever from Saudi Arabia because of the name, or there's the one in 1995. There's more to talk about there. The reason it annoyed fans so much is because of the 60-second intervals, which meant it zoomed by. So it felt like you were on drugs. All you need to do is go look at the WWE roster in the mid-90s though, and yeah, they were screwed before entrant number 1. No disrespect to these guys, but Aldo Montoya was number 20 and Mantar was 21. Why build that up for an extra 60 seconds? You're actually more likely to get some hate. So it's actually something Vince McMahon should have used more as self-awareness actually came into play. And I tell you, that never happened. Shawn Michaels was the winner, which was the right move, so we just added in proper stars like Bret Hart, the British Bulldog, Lex Luger, and Owen Hart as and when is necessary. So sure. In comparison, it's not that good, but for what the WWF had, they used it in the right way, and it deserves more credit. Number 8, Jackass at WrestleMania. I know this one is true because I saw it firsthand. When it became obvious that Sami Zayn would face Johnny Knoxville at WrestleMania 38, however, there were face palms all around. People could not believe it. It began at the 2022 Royal Rumble when Johnny popped up as a surprise, so essentially this carried on for months. What happened? Sami Zayn proved he was an all-time performer and gave us utter joy in a wrestling ring. The rest of the Jackass crew added to the experience, and it is a genuine delight to watch. All the beats work and you'll laugh out loud when you should. It's the perfect evidence that wrestling should always be a variety show. Again, too, it is all the credit to Sami Zayn. Everybody played their part, but it's clear this was his brainchild. Dare I say it? It was a mini masterpiece. Number 7, the House of Horrors. The match between Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania 33 did not work. We did some weird things with overhead projectors. Most of the fans were confused. It happens. It meant we got to Payback 2017 and WWE announced a House of Horrors match between the two. But nobody knew what to think, because what the flub was that? It was, however, full-on cinematic before the pandemic, which counted for something. Yeah. Actually pretty good. It certainly wasn't the greatest of all time entry, but it definitely inspired WWE years later, and as ever, Bray just got it. He knew what to do to make these things interesting. It helped that it was a B pay-per-view, which WWE really wasn't taking seriously at the time. Jump forward to the future, and the company benefited from this template hugely. It made them realize what they could do when the world just stopped. The 6th, the greatest wrestling match ever. Even Adam Copeland has spoken about how mad this was. It's impossible to have the greatest wrestling match ever, because it all comes down to taste. Still, if we go to Backlash 2020, where once again WWE was suffering due to the pandemic, we took a recently returned Edge and Randy Orton, told them to go and rewrite the game. Yeah, good luck with that. Now, maybe somebody out there thinks they nailed the stipulation, but you can just forget about it. The match is very, very good, and reminded you that the Rated R Superstar could still go after almost a decade away. WWE knew what they were doing too, as they needed to create that channel, which wasn't there because fans had vanished, and all the small touches we threw in were quite nice. The production team were allowed to go crazy. It's also one of the few bouts you can go back and watch now. I suppose elements of this helped the Thunderdome too. WWE borrowed a lot from here. At a crazy time. Number 5, the custody of Dominic ladder match. So this was bonkers. But look, here we are in 2024 and we are still talking about it. SummerSlam 2005 did divide fans though, because how did this make any sense? Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio were fighting over custody of a real human boy. I'm not sure the courts are going to allow that. The fact that condoms use it today justifies it for me, but also listen to who is involved. Eddie and Rey. They couldn't have bad matches if they tried, so even though the stakes were ridiculous, they made it brilliant. If you like the OTT side of wrestling too, this had everything you need. It's a bit like Scott Hall and Sean Waltman. When you have workers this good, you don't have to worry about the rest, they will make it work. It's also really funny, so yeah, this is all good with me, and given what has happened over the last 20 years, it will give you some good damn memories. Number 4, the Gimmick Battle Royale. So if you watch my content, this won't surprise you. It is, as far as I know, the last appearance of one Repo Man in the WWE. Bring him back. It was WrestleMania 17 too, when we decided to allow a group of legends to compete in a Battle Royal, and look, it's not the best thing you'll ever see, but it's pretty darn fun. Bobby the Brain Heenan is hilarious on commentary as he bemoans how slow the Iron Sheik is getting to the ring. Some of the entrants here. Duke the Dumpster Drozy, for example. He wasn't exactly a legacy talent. Actually, Duke had only been off TV for 5 years, because that's how fast the Attitude Era blew up. I'm not sure you need to do this at Mania again, but as an idea, yeah, it'll make you laugh, which should be the point. This is meant to be entertainment. You could even make it a Hall of Fame version, which would give some of the legends an extra payday. There's nothing wrong with that. And look, we do have 365 days worth of content to fill. There's no reason not to do it. Number 3, the blindfold match. Talk about a stipulation that can go in wildly different directions. Picking who is involved is really important. Now, the worst to some people is likely Jake Roberts versus Rick Martel from WrestleMania 7, which gets a good kicking these days. I do get it. But go and watch it now and remember what it's meant to be. I actually think it's quite enjoyable. After all, the pair are meant to be blind, so why would they have a 5-star classic? They quite clearly understand the assignment and ham it up, especially Rick. That dude is taking pratfalls like his life depended on it. The fans are into it as well as Jake decides he's just going to try and find that DDT. And remember, everybody knew it was stupid. Just make sure you're in a similar mood. I think this is what wrestling is all about sometimes, just thinking outside the box and ensuring we all have a good time. This certainly tickled me, which is a terrible thing to say. So let's go do it again. Number 2, the dual Money in the Bank ladder match. So we do return to the pandemic as WWE had to do everything different, which meant the men and women's Money in the Bank happened at the same time. Given it was more of a mini movie than a match, it worked as we even had cameos. Brother Love was in the 2021. So weird. This was also done like a video game as you had to fight to the top of WWE HQ, but it did have another major upside. The concept didn't feel burned out by the end of the event as we only had one singular match. Now, WWE actually balances this quite well today, but one year if you could figure it out, I don't think this would be the worst idea. It would also up the stakes, even though men and women are kept separate, it's still more bodies to get through. You could even take it a step further and have only one briefcase hanging from the rafters, meaning there's only one Money in the Bank holder for the entire year. That would send people nuts. So once again, it comes down to fun. Although Baron Corbin did literally kill people during this version, maybe don't do that bit again. Number 1, we'll see. So the reason you don't want to do this is because Hornswoggle and El Torito smashed it. Talk about taking what sounded like a stupid idea and turning it into a somewhat classic. It all comes down to how these guys approached it and the intensity they had, because you believe they wanted to win. That's half the wrestling battle. If they care, I can care. This went down at Extreme Rules 2014 and amazingly was on the pre-show. Everybody forgets that, but Swoggle and Torito saw it as an opportunity, and yeah, this was really good. Why not? They knew how to work. So I'm not saying trying to replicate this verbatim, but in terms of taking a fun gimmick and not turning it into a one-note joke, I mean, this is the template, and you're probably laughing at me now, but go and give it a chance. I promise you will be surprised.
Hindsight is a wonderful thing, eh? It filters out knee-jerk reactions like the kind you'd see on social media, and enables one to see that sometimes WWE's creative types do know best. Many of the seemingly dumb gimmicks here were met with raised eyebrows and scoffing from fans, but they all had merit. So I am Gareth, this is WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 20 dumb WWE gimmick changes that we didn't want to admit were genius. Number 20, the boogeyman comes to get you forever. Imagine this. Someone pulls you aside in the summer of 2005 and says, "Psst, the boogeyman will be one of WWE's most enduring characters." You'd have laughed right in their stupid face. How could Marty Wright's cartoonish horror nonsense endure? Well, it has. That imaginary person from 05 was bang on and good for them. Nobody could have predicted that such an overtly silly character as this would become one of WWE's go-to cameo bookings for a generation. Boogie hasn't appeared for a few years now, granted, but we're coming up to the 20-year mark since he debuted his worm-eating ploy to bag a company contract. That is remarkable for something so one-note. It's almost impossible to name a handful of Boogeyman matches, and yet he'll likely show up again here or there in the future whenever creative needs something easy to get a nostalgia pop. Who the hell saw this wrestle-crap-worthy gimmick hanging around for so long? Number 19, R-Truth is a friendly idiot. In 2011, R-Truth started yakking on about a mysterious imaginary pal of his own, Little Jimmy. No, Jim didn't say anything about the Boogeyman's legacy, but he did become an invisible tool that Truth could use to power his promos. The whole thing was so curiously entertaining that the guy even bagged a main event match with John Cena at one point. Fast forward to 2024, and R-Truth has cranked up the resident idiot dial to charm fans with some legitimately funny backstage skits. His work opposite Judgment Day, for example, almost caused Damian Priest and Finn Balor to corpse on multiple occasions, and the laughter coming from crowds was genuine. This is the funniest Truth has ever been, really, which is almost certainly something nobody saw coming for the guy a full decade at least after his prime. Ron Killings just works as a friendly, well-meaning moron, and the fact he even survived the dreary 24/7 title day says it all. In truth we trust, then, now, forever. But I want to know really quickly, what has been your favourite R-Truth moment in WWE? Was it the silly ladder nonsense at the Royal Rumble that one time, or something else? You let me know in the comments section down below. Number 18, sad Baron Corbin is sad. There is a section of the wrestling fanbase that will never ever like Baron Corbin, and that's fair enough. But even the man's harshest critics must admit that he put his all into that King Corbin to bum-ass Corbin, Pat McAfee's words, not mine, change in 2021. Almost overnight, Corbs went from annoying royal stalwart to someone just down on his luck. Baron lost his crown and spiraled into a funk. He should have sucked hard. But Corbin dedicated himself to the role and made it work by living the damn gimmick. He wore the same shirt over and over again, stopped shaving his head, and even grew an unkept beard. The dude got some fun out of his switch at least. Sure, happy Corbin on the other end was unbelievably lame, but the sad era was gold looking back. The experiment even threatened to turn Baron into a sympathetic babyface, before WWE went full-blown villain with the happy run instead. Dumb? Yeah, sure. But a genius way to move on from the King gimmick? You betcha. Number 17, hi, I'm Dolph Ziggler. Current TNA man Nick Nemeth's face must have been a picture when WWE's writers laid out their latest plan for him in 2008. So you've been a golf caddy for a racist gimmick, and a cheerleader who was humiliated. Now you'll be someone who shakes hands backstage and, wait for it, introduces themselves. Sounds like money to me. Seriously, even the name Dolph Ziggler was ridiculed on various internet forums at the time. It sounded so damn silly, and the way Dolph tried getting friendly with various workers behind the curtain was tiresome after just a handful of promos. Then something special happened. Ziggler volleyed the paper-thin handshaking gimmick into orbit and showed what he was capable of in ring. Comparisons were made to everyone from Kurt Hennig to Shawn Michaels, and Dolph went on to enjoy a WWE run that lasted right up until 2023. In hindsight, as stupid as it seemed, going from Nikki of the Spirit Squad to slicked-back rookie Ziggler at least gave him a platform to show off his skills. Number 16, Al Snow gives the world head. Many gimmicks from the vaunted Attitude Era seemed like they'd been crafted by a teenage boy playing WWE 2K24's Universe Mode. Take Al Snow. He was a walking punchline who carried a mannequin head that was named after a certain sexual act. That was the entire purpose of the head gimmick. It got over huge though, everybody wanted head. Sorry. In fairness, Al started this journey in ECW, but that demotion, and it was considered a demotion at the time, proved to be a blessing for the ex-Leaf Cassidy. He'd been going nowhere on the WWF main roster, so jetting off to Paul Heyman land for a while turned out to be a genius move. Al Snow and Head was the perfect blend of goofy, sophomoric fun and attitude raunch people expected back in the late 1990s. And while few back then cared to acknowledge it was a genius move from Al to learn another hold outside the WWF bubble, it definitely was. Number 15, Dirty Dominic Mysterio goes to jail. Poor little Dom Dom gets hacked to bits on social media. Fire up your favorite timeline, punch in his name, and you're sure to see comments criticizing WWE for nepotism, and or Dominic Mysterio himself for daring to have a legendary father. Those cries intensified when Dom and Ray formed a tag team on TV. People were so rough on Mysterio Jr. Then WWE handed Dominic a reprieve. He turned heel on his dad, and broke out of Ray's shadow by pretending to be a jailbird who lived the life of a hardened, albeit falsely imprisoned criminal behind bars. Immediately, Dom had something to hang his hat on in promos. But creative wasn't done yet. Dirty Dominic assumed a significant role in the revamped post-Edge version of Judgment Day, and has not looked back since. Yes, the jail time stuff might have been hokey and a bit unbelievable, but it did turn Dom into more than just Ray's gangly kid. He got a hell of a Mania entrance out of it too. Number 14, Right to Censor trashes raunchy gimmicks. The wrestling community hasn't been kind to Right to Censor since it vanished from screens. A lot of that hate seems to be aimed at the knowingly dreadful entrance theme they used, but it was supposed to be annoying. Then there are those who are brassed off that the WWF curtailed popular gimmicks like The Godfather or Val Venus. Again, that was done on purpose. You were supposed to be angry that the pimp and porn star characters vanished in favor of hoity-toity buttoned-up types, who were more likely to preach against past transgressions than revel in them. Right to Censor was a quite excellent send-up of the real-life Parents Television Council putting heat on the company for risque content. It even gave going nowhere mid-carders like Stevie Richards, Bull Buchanan, and Ivory some purpose they badly needed if they were going to survive on the roster. Not a bad piece of business if you ask me. Number 13, Happy Rusev Day. Say hello to a silly catchphrase that was likely meant to last for a few weeks at most. After beating Randy Orton in 2017, Rusev declared every day Rusev Day, and began aggressively barking that at fans. This routine heel move played before gentle boos for a while, but then people started enjoying the Bulgarian's OTT presentation. It was something totally fresh for him, and that is what mattered to fans. WWE cut the legs off the idea instead of running with it, of course. Being more specific, Vince McMahon didn't like that Rusev Day was playing before Cheers, and trashed the gimmick rather than continuing to make cold hard cash aplenty from merch for as long as possible. Now that was dumber than Rusev, Lana, and Aiden English going overboard by inventing fake holidays could ever hope to be. Attend any WWE show between 2017 and 2018, and you'd likely see a Rusev Day t-shirt in the crowd. They were everywhere. The catchphrase was over as heck for a year or so before McMahon stupidly buried it. It's wild that something so silly clicked, then got binned because it was never meant to gain traction. Number 12, Heath Slater's Got Kids. What a trip 2016 was, man. WWE brought the brand split back, and Heath Slater teamed with Rhino to become the least likely tag team success in years. Their entire act revolved around Slater moaning that he had to win to feed his kids back home. Oh, and Rhino also adored squeezy cheese from a tube too, for some reason. Heath would passionately put forward his babyface case in promos, as the ex-ECW original munched cheese on crackers and stared down the lens. It was so odd, but people gobbled the Twin Everyman gimmick up and turned the Slater-Rhino combo into oddball SmackDown Tag Team Champions. You love to see it. The genius here was that Slater in particular had been struggling since the Nexus days. 3MB, the social outcast, and more weighed him down rather than lifting him up. Who could have known that something so simple as providing for his off-screen children and taking a kick in from Brock Lesnar for trying to do so would get him so damn over, eh? Number 11, Chad Gable wants you to shush. Shorty G was an abomination of an idea that shouldn't have ever left WWE creative meetings. Ripping the hell out of Chad Gable for being roughly the same height as most workers poking fun at his size was a frankly rubbish concept, and people were glad to see the back of it. WWE's next ploy for Chad was to have him head up the heelish Alpha Academy and form a tag team with Otis. The pair were played for laughs initially as Gable obnoxiously yelled "shush please" at everyone, and folks figured this would likely just burn out and fade away after a few months of on-off TV time. Not quite though. The shush thing randomly caught on, and the Academy has grown to add members like Maxine and Akira Tozawa. Incredibly, Chad also went from a going nowhere in a hurry heel to gritty underdog babyface who some would have preferred to see wrestle Gunter one-on-one at WrestleMania 40 over Sami Zayn. That is a staggering upturn for Gable's career, all things considered. Cheers for watching this wrestling video today, folks. Now go and be the genius that I know you are and tap that subscribe button down below for more WhatCulture wrestling in your life. Number 10, the Hurricane is coming through. This should not have worked, especially mid-invasion angle. Talented cruiserweight and WCW man Shane Helms turned into a bogus superhero called the Hurricane in 2001. Keep in mind this happened whilst the WCW-ECW alliance storyline was still the WWF's focus, so Hurricane should have hurritanked in a flash. Yes, that was another superhero joke and I'm not sorry. He did not tank though, not even close. Wrestling magazines chastised the company for slapping a green light on Helms' switch at the time, but somehow Helms was so damn good at the role that he turned it into a niche instead of a noose. The Hurricane was one of the most loved mid-carders on the entire roster by 2002. Shane's creativity and energetic all-or-nothing approach to the gimmick manifested memorable moments versus The Rock and other top-liners. Few, if anyone, had that on their predictions list when he was teaming with Lance Storm in the Alliance. Number 9, Too Cool Defy the Odds. Vince Russo's original idea for Too Cool was to create an anti-Hardy Boys act that'd be totally uncool. The then WWF writer enlisted Scott Taylor and Brian Christopher tweaked their pre-existing Too Much name, and boom, Scotty 2 Hottie and Grandmaster Sexay were thrust into the world kicking and screaming. Just look at those names, man. Hottie and Sexay should have been booed out of the building. But fans love the bucket hats, goofy goggles, and ridiculous dance moves. People were even more into Too Cool when when the thong-wearing Rikishi was added to the lineup. And together, Too Cool enjoyed their 15 minutes of fame as a red-hot babyface gimmick through much of 2000. That was an accidental byproduct of Russo's change-up. But nobody was complaining. Too Cool seemed destined for the ex-horrible WWE gimmick changes list treatments for decades to come. But no, it's now fondly recalled as one of the best gimmicks of the time. Number 8, Sami Zayn is a conspiracy theorist. Cherished workhorse Sami Zayn laid foundations for his 2021 conspiracy theorist gimmick long before WWE pulled the trigger on it. He brought up the company's treatment of him when managing Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro in 2019, but didn't go full-blown conspiracy nut until he was on his own again. Collectively, fans wondered if the character had legs, but Zayn knew he could make it work. Amazingly, and to his credit, he did too. In fact, Sami showed off the kind of charisma that'd stand him in good stead years later when joining the Bloodline, and eventually spinning out into an unlikely babyface singles run. Droning on about how he was being held back by management helped sow seeds for that moment. Zayn's promos were so passionately produced that it was hard to take your eyes off him, really, and he steadily built a groundswell of support on the mid-card before skyrocketing up the card towards main events. There was hidden genius to all that dumb conspiracy stuff, you know. Number 7, Stardust changes Cody Rhodes. Okay, so this one stands out as a bit unique, and some of you definitely won't agree. That's fine, because it wasn't genius in a deliberate sense. Playing the Stardust character for so long soured Cody Rhodes on WWE life. So much so that he requested his release in 2016 and went out into the big bad world of wrestling solo. A critically acclaimed indie run followed, and AEW was born from that yearning for more. Cody has since returned to become a genuine WWE megastar too. What a happy accident Stardust was looking back then. That's what makes his story so standalone on this list. Rhodes agreed that playing a costumed riff on his brother's Goldust gimmick sucked long term. However, it was accidentally genius because it pushed him to become more. Would Cody have become the confident main eventer he is in 2024 without those unwanted trials and tribulations? It's up for debate. He seemed destined to be a career mid-carder before Stardust pushed him to seek change. Accidental genius is still genius, so it definitely still counts. Number 6, JBL ditches the beer drinking. JBL was a sensational upgrade for Bradshaw. It was unwanted at the time though, chiefly because his APA tag with Farouk had been so over with live crowds. You knew what you were getting with the beer drinking card playing Guns for Hire, which made it difficult to accept that the ride was really over. WWE put its full might behind JBL's seemingly dumb DiBiase meets J.R. Ewing from Dallas character. Bradshaw definitely wasn't a popular choice to become one of SmackDown's focal points in 2004, but it was probably the right call in retrospect. He was perfect for the role of the obnoxious heel businessman, and successfully transitioned from mid-card to main events without pause. Number 5, Damien Mizdow. Playing a hammy stunt double defo would have tanked in the wrong hands, but Damien Sandow needed something light and fun following his failure as the intellectual savior of the masses. Rather than get the petted lip and bemoan his Money in the Bank flop, Sandow embraced the chance to become the Miz's stand-in. How he and Miz kept a straight face is beyond everyone though, because Damien was superb here. He'd wear toy replicas of Miz's titles, and generally did everything in his power to get fans on side and show WWE he was a team player, and the dude turned the gimmick into something more than it deserved to be. Number 4, The Undertaker is a biker? It's easy to roll with the punches and downplay what risks The Undertaker was taking in 2000 when he morphed from satanic undead overlord into a tobacco-chewing biker. That was a risk the dead man was willing to take, cause he realized change was needed even if everyone else was blind to that necessity. Taker has since lifted the lid on his monumental switch by telling fans on YouTube that countless people behind the scenes told him he should scrap plans and revert to type backstage at Judgment Day 2000. Becoming the American badass would humanize his character too much, everyone reasoned, but he was having none of it and plowed ahead anyway. Humanizing The Undertaker actually helped prolong his run, especially during an era that was less reliant on supernatural shenanigans or cartoonish flair. Taker also knew he could always return to his roots eventually, which was a Mensa high-level bit of foresight from someone willing to take the plunge most wouldn't. Number 3, King Booker. The buffoonish King gimmick has been a creative noose for so many workers not named Jerry Lawler or Randy Savage. But Booker T stands proudly as someone who made it click. Think about the failures here. There's some properly great talent. Harley Race, Haku, Sheamus, and Wade Barrett all come to mind. King Booker and his beautiful Queen Sharmell were different though. They hurled themselves into a delusional royal world and delivered performances so over the top it was impossible to cast your gaze elsewhere. The way Booker went from respected worker to despotic royal ruler after winning the 2006 King of the Ring tournament was stunning. Not just any old worker could have pulled that off the way he did. Becoming king breathed new life into Booker's WWE career because he was willing to clown himself at the right times too. Like only the best workers can, Book also knew when to dial down the silliness and get intense mid-match. And he remains one of the best to ever adopt a typically unwanted gimmick. Number 2, John Cena equals Vanilla Ice / Eminem. As legend has it, people heard John Cena rapping on a WWE tour and were impressed by how good he was. Then one cosplay as Vanilla Ice during a SmackDown Halloween party later, and Cena's destiny was locked in. He'd become pro wrestling's answer to bad boy rappers like Eminem. Being honest, John's approach had a splash of Fred Durst in there too. He was a phony hard man at times, but it saved Cena from the WWE chopping block. He apparently thought he was in line to be released, and it also let the guy show some actual potential. Overnight, he became more than a generic babyface in boots and tights screaming about ruthless aggression. But even with that being said, no one realistically thought Cena had a chance of turning the rap game into something above mid-card. It's astonishing then that JC went on to become WWE's poster boy for around a decade pre-Roman Reigns. Of course, he had to tone down the rap stuff to get there, but yes, that still counts as an essential part of his growth. Number 1, Mick Foley is Dude Love. Speaking of huge risks, few in WWE history took a bigger one than Mick Foley in 1997. He'd found fame as Cactus Jack elsewhere, and Mankind after signing with the promotion. But Mick loved the thought of bringing his goofy teenage creation to flagship programming like Raw is War. Thus, Dude Love was born. It could have backfired too, and theoretically killed off his more established Mankind character. How could fans ever accept Mankind again if the dude bombed spectacularly? Foley didn't need to worry about that, however, because everyone accepted Mr. Love with open arms, man. It was dumber than dumb in 97, but playing Dude Love actually let Mick showcase more of his naturally likable personality behind the mask he'd been wearing on TV. That, in turn, evolved the Mankind gimmick into more than it arguably had any right to be, too. Genius stuff all around, I'm sure you'll agree.
So do you know what WWE likes to do? They like to hire you and change your name. Now, we know the reason why they do this is because it comes down to licensing and merchandise. Sometimes it still makes you go, what? However, like all things in life, eventually we get used to them. Actually, there's a bunch of dumb ones. But damn it, now makes sense. Let's do it. Number 10, Rey Mysterio Jr. to Rey Mysterio. And this one gets talked about all the time, because when Rey Mysterio Jr. finally did join WWE, Vince McMahon said, well, we're getting rid of that Jr. because Vince McMahon's real name is Vince McMahon Jr. and he doesn't like being called Jr. As we know, that guy is just all kinds of bad. Let's not talk about it. However, there was some sense behind this because the idea was to not call attention to the fact that maybe Rey Mysterio is a small little child, especially giving him stature, so we're just going to pitch him as Rey Mysterio. Most of this came down to his family legacy as well, and really I suppose it comes down to perception. They also didn't want anybody to think that he was below anybody else in his clan. Or something like that. I mean, Ray is so good, you could have called him Charles Dingbat, he still would have gone on to become one of the best wrestlers ever. But yeah, this one's fine. Number 9, A-Kid to Axiom. So for a long old while, especially over here in Europe, A-Kid was a standout superstar. So of course, eventually he got a deal with WWE in 2019, and when he joined NXT, he became Axiom. And everyone went, sounds like a robot. He also became the latest masked superstar, but I choose to look at it this way. Whether you like to believe it or not, professional wrestling, especially WWE, is watched by a lot of children. So if you see the now Axiom flying around the ring and the fact he looks like a superhero, actually, I think this is a damn good choice that really works. It's not like he's been booked badly either. I think this is the real reason fans get worried because again, if somebody is called Radiator Man, you're probably going to be like, oh my gosh, they're going to be so hot right now. Shouldn't have said it, worst thing I've ever said. But when it comes to Axiom, have you seen him down in NXT? This guy is so damn good. And he has such a big upside when he eventually does get to the main roster, even though he's not a big bad jack individual. I still think he's totally gonna smash it. Number 8, Carlito Caribbean Cool to Carlito. But yes, you probably don't remember this, but when Carlito did debut in 2004, somebody decided his last and middle name should be Caribbean Cool. The man himself was also told to say this in all promos, as were the commentators. Oh my gosh. It's one of those occasions where they won't just say Carlito, so it's Carlito Caribbean Cool for about 72 times when he is in a match. Eventually, you just want to punch yourself in the face. But if you are going to do that, just call him Triple C, even with obvious comparisons. But thankfully, after a few months, somebody in the creative writing room went, guys, I think this is a bit dumb. Why don't we just call him Carlito? Everyone else went, oh yeah, we should do that. And we did. For some reason, even way back then, there were some fans that were offended by this. But again, let's say it all together. And the brand new heavyweight champion, Carlito Caribbean Cool. Why would you want to put yourself through such an ordeal? Number 7, Eli Drake to LA Knight. So try and think back to where you were in 2021 when Eli Drake did become LA Knight. Everybody freaked out again because they were like, why have we called him after a made-up TV show? The thing is though, given how the character was going to develop, I actually think this name worked very well. Although of course, there's a caveat here, maybe this is why people like it these days, he had to become Max Dupree first. Excuse me, Max Dupree. All of this went so badly he was going to get fired at one point before there was a big shifteroo and he went back to being LA Knight, which he had been in NXT, which begs the question, why did we put so much time into that in the developmental system if when he was going to come up to the main roster, we were just going to change him again? Now there is a sad part to this because of course it meant the end of the maximum male models and I thought they were brilliant, but these days, LA Knight just works. So it's a massive round of applause for whoever did come up with that one, and again, it passes the test. I can damn well hear that name at WrestleMania. Number 6, Big E Langston to Big E. Now, somewhere between the Royal Rumble and the Elimination Chamber in 2014, the Langston part got thrown by the wayside. And the reason I can't pinpoint it is because in that Rumble, he was definitely called Big E Langston. And this was another one that kind of came at a bad time because it just seemed like the company had a massive hard-on, shouldn't have said it, for just calling people by their first name. But look, it has been a decade since we've made this change. And does anybody miss that last name now? I don't think so. Big E, well, it just works. So I thought about this and I figured it out, and it probably ties into a lot of these. It's because we as a human race don't like change. I understand that. It's nice and warm and comforted when you are in your routine, but sometimes we have to embrace whatever life is gonna throw at us, including just calling someone Big E. Also, look at the dude, he is humongous. At least that part always works. Number 5, Bronson Rex Steiner to Bron Breakker. Now this one does make all the sense in the world, because when you sign a Steiner to your company, as WWE did in February 2021, you want that family lineage to live on. But the powers that be went, nope, we ain't gonna do it. Instead we came up with Bron Breakker, which does sound like it just fell out the pages of Marvel Comics. I don't want to get too much into controversy here though, but this one I don't think any of us can argue, because look, when you do go through the Steiner history, well, even up to 2023, it is quite controversial, so why the flub would you want to tie that in? And it's not like this has affected anything, because we all know where he came from, and if you don't know, it's probably because you don't even know who the Steiners are, so who is this hurting? Also, Bron Breakker is so damn good. Once again, you could call him Pete McGee, and he's still going to be a future world champion. He hits the ropes so damn fast. I can't wait for him to be permanent on the main roster. He is gonna be so damn great. Number 4, Nick Nemeth to Dolph Ziggler. Now, I actually think you can argue with this one. When you go and listen to the interviews that Dolph Ziggler / Nick Nemeth did when he left the WWE, he explained the origins of this and how he was perplexed, because originally he was meant to be like David Douglas or something. And when he asked about this, creative said, yeah, we just need a name that kind of sounds the same, both in the first and the last part. It was like, my name is Nick Nemeth. It literally does that. Instead, we came up with Dolph Ziggler just because it was totally random and poor Dolph would have to go around and shake everybody's hand. And I don't think this was a benefit at all. And the only reason we did all come around to the idea is 1, it was around for so long, but also 2, the real life Nick Nemeth was so damn good, he proved what I've been saying this entire video. You can come up with any moniker you want, and if the person using it does have the skill, everything will be alright. Even then though, even if we had gone with Nick Nemeth. I don't think WWE would have ever given him what he did deserve. Again, it's all there on Google. But ever since he has returned, using his real-life name, well, go look at some of the YouTube views that he's done. It's not like people are surprised by this. This is definitely one for the comments. Number 3, Paul White to the Big Show. Or the Giant, I suppose. You could use his WCW name. But really, when you call someone the Big Show, everyone's gonna know what you're getting at. Paul White is a fine name. There's nothing wrong with Paul White, but it just means if you are a fan, you have to take that extra step before you go, well, who the hell is that Huss? But once more, if you're called the Big Show or Very Large Man, you've done the work for him. If you do transport yourself back to 1999, though, people went totally bonkers about this, and actually I understand. Because the first time you heard the Big Show, especially the theme tune, whoa, I'm the Big Show, you're like, what world are we living in? What's a Big Show? It's been this way for over 20 years though, and now we even do accept it, to the point he's in AEW as Paul White, and what does everybody call him? You can figure it out. Number 2, Prince Devitt to Finn Balor. So once again, if you are a hardcore New Japan fan and you have invested all your time and money into Prince Devitt, and then he arrives in WWE as Finn Balor, you're gonna be like, man, why do they do this to me every single time? There's also a bit of a meltdown because WWE came up with this just because it tied into Irish mythology. You can just imagine it. It was also during a period where Vince McMahon was just Vince McMahonifying everything. But actually now, as we do stand here in 2024, I think Finn Balor is a pretty badass wrestling name. Now, a lot of this does come down to the fact that he is so damn talented and in many ways still vastly underrated. But that's kind of the point. He went and made it work. Also, his real name is Fergal Devitt, so this way he can be completely separated from the two. And imagine he does leave WWE one day, and he goes back to AEW, well not back to AEW, but back to the indie scene, and he goes back to Devitt. I think a lot of people will scratch their heads, and they'll probably think that's the made-up name, but it totally isn't. Number 1, Volta to Gunther. So you just knew that this was going to be number 1, and I do want to point out, if we had gone with what WWE originally wanted to do, I would have been genuinely offended. I'm going to talk about it here, but once again, Google is your friend. Thankfully, even WWE realized this, and in January 2022, Gunther did announce to the world that he was now Gunther. So we've basically had it for a couple of years. There's just something about it. But I don't know. I think Walter probably would have been fine as well. But when it comes to the G, man, I'm a big fan. That rhymes, so it must be true. You do have to bring in the fact that he did go on to become the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion ever. I'm just going to do it one more time as the video is about to end. You could call him Larry Lamppost, but if he can walk out with that championship and go, man, I've held this for over a year and nobody can beat me, you're going to be like, damn, Lar, you're really amazing. What's even cooler is that he is absolutely going to ride this name to the top of the industry, and hopefully that will be a lesson for us all. Make sure you're not boxed in just because somebody does give you a silly name, because you can still go on to achieve the greatest of all things.